Hey everyone, this is Stelly FT with Closeout, and today I want to talk about how to break bad news to your team. This is a question I've been asked quite frequently lately. In one way or another, in one flavor or another, the question is always, hey, something went terribly wrong, there's a crisis, there's a really big bad news that popped up, and I have to break that bad news to my team. A lot of that is within the context of the startup environment. Some of it is in the context of just the sales team and sales org environment. But it's a universal question people have is how do I deliver bad news to the people I'm responsible for? What is the best tactic and strategy and philosophy behind doing that? Because honestly, it sucks when you have to, and it's always intimidating and it always feels overwhelming, which is probably the starting point, right? So first of all, relax. Um, Learning how to break bad news and learning how to manage your own emotional household, which is one of my favorite criteria that Warren Buffett is selecting his CEOs based on, their ability to manage their emotional household and their emotional stability. That is what you're paid for. That is why you're a leader. That is why you want to be a leader. It's because somebody has to manage these very, tumultuous times. And this is an opportunity for you to grow as a leader and to become good at it. And also it's an opportunity for you to be a steward and to be serving your team. This is a moment where you can make a difference and you can truly empower your people. So just accept that it's part of the job, it's part of reality. There's always going to be some bad news. It's just part of life. And learning how to deal with those bad news and learning how to deliver them authentically, honestly, and productively is part of the job description. It's something you just have to learn and master. So it's just part of the gig. Here's a few things you shouldn't be doing when it comes to delivering bad news, right? So a few of the kind of worst ways that I've seen leaders and managers breaking bad news to their team. Well, first, one of the worst ways that you can deliver bad news is inauthentically, is when you try to hide the bad news, when you try to package it up, put lipstick on the bad news pig, when you try to hide it, which is probably the worst thing, is like you get some bad news and then you ask yourself, how can I make sure that nobody in my team knows about this? And you're trying to you have to do all these schemes to make sure that nobody realizes and recognizes, that there are bad news. That's the worst thing they can do. Now, instead of solving the problem, you spend all your energy and time trying to hide it. Chances are you're not going to succeed in that. Somebody's going to pick it up. And then not just have you wasted all this time and energy, it created all these anxiety and stress for yourself, but you've also have broken that news in the worst possible way, which is somebody discovered it while you were trying to hide it, which means now all trust is gone. Your position as a leader and manager is completely compromised, and people will not just overreact to the bad news and be really upset about it, rightfully so, because you were hiding it, but they also are gonna start wondering and becoming pretty schizophrenic on the question or freaked out on the question on what other bad news are there out there that have been hidden away from us. So please don't do that. That's a horrible idea. Don't try to hide the bad news. But the other thing is don't try to overcompensate or put lipstick on the pig. Don't bullshit people. Don't pretend that you're totally fine with this and there's nothing wrong with it when you internally are totally stressed out and you don't believe the message. People can pick up on incongruencies in your communication when you tell people, oh, I'm not worried at all about this, but they can sense that you're absolutely worried out of your mind. Don't lie. Don't pretend it's not a big deal what it is. Don't hide the fact when you try to break the news to people. Don't fuck around and tell them the story. Let me tell you about a time when I was a little boy and I lost my favorite toy. Don't bury the lead. Don't tell people. Don't do a 1 hour meeting where 55 minutes of the 1 hour meeting you telling people bullshit about how amazing everything is, and then the last second you're cramming in that there's a little bit of bad news, but it's not really that bad. Don't do any of that shit. Here's what you should do when you have to break bad news to your team. Well, step one is when you receive the bad news is take a moment to take it all in. First, you have to really calm down because your immediate response is usually going to be an overreaction. It might be a mental overreaction, it might be an emotional overreaction, but your first response is going to be overreacting internally in one way or another when bad news and a bad surprise pops up. It's totally normal and human in most cases. So when that happens, first, when you hear the bad news, take a moment to deal with your own emotions and your own reactions. Take a moment to really meditate on the problem and to marinate on it a little bit. Take the proper amount of time to truly understand it. Don't snap into action immediately. Don't snap into decision making immediately. Don't try to prescribe a solution instantly. Take a moment to truly understand what the bad news is, what the problem is, why it happened, and what does it truly mean. And here's a quick, simple exercise you can do. It's the "and what happened else" exercise when it comes to bad news. Here's a little hack. Whenever I'm worried or there's something terribly going wrong, I'll sit down and I'll actually do the exercise of trying to play out the worst case scenario until its final consequence. And 99% of the time you realize the final consequence is not that final and it's not that consequential and it's not the end of the world. So I'm probably overreacting in the moment, but with enough perspective, this is not that big of a deal. So here's what I'll do. Let's say the bad news is whatever, a big customer is just canceled, right? You lost some massive deal, whatever it is. You sit down and you write down, we just lost this massive customer. And then you ask the question, okay, what will happen now? What will happen next now that we lost this big customer? And you go, well, we're going to struggle with our financial year and our numbers are going to be horrible. And you go, okay, good, I acknowledge that reality. Our numbers are going to be horrible. And what happens next? What's the consequence of that? What's most likely to happen next? Well, next is we're going to have to report this to our board, and I'm probably going to be, getting criticized by the board, and we're probably going to get some more pressure on the next quarter because of that. And then you go, okay, good, I acknowledge that. So we get some pressure, we get the board to push. What happens then next quarter? Well, we're probably going to have to push really hard and come together as a team and really make magic happen. Because if not, we get into real trouble in raising the next round. And then you go, okay, good. What happens if we get into trouble and we raise the next round? Well, then, we're going to have to probably raise a round. We have investors who are going to raise a round, but it's not going to be as good of terms that we like them. Okay, and what will happen if the terms are not as good? And you play this out, and eventually, usually it's like, well, if the company is failing, all this didn't matter. And if the company truly succeeds, all this doesn't really matter. Right? Or it's not that consequential. It won't make that big of an impact in the long term of things. Now, there are exceptions to the rule where this what if game will end up in and then the company is dead. But even in those cases, if you keep going and you say, well, what happens if this company is bankrupt? You go, well, then, I'll pick, we'll still do something. I still want to work with my co-founders. I still want to work with a bunch of people from this team. We're just going to start something new and raise a new round and give this another go, right? If you play this game long enough, over a long enough period of time, you're always going to be fine, right? You're always going to see that with enough perspective and with a long enough timeline. This bad news event that's happened this morning is probably not going to be that consequential. That's one little trick and hack to kind of calm yourself down and put things into perspective for yourself. But you also have to ask the 5 whys of why the problem happened, right? Not just what is the surface level issue here, but why did it arise? What did you miss? And sometimes you're not going to be able to get to all the answers, but you want to take half an hour. You want to think through some of the basic questions of what is the true issue here that caused the bad news to happen in the first place. So what I'm saying here is once the bad news is broken to you, once you learn the bad news, you have to take a little bit of time to meditate on that, to soul search, to calm down emotionally, and to dig a little bit deeper to truly understand what are the consequences here, what does all the data suggest that what really truly happened here. And then what you do next is you need to bring in people to get advice and to get more data, more information on. So depending on the bad news, you probably want to bring in the leadership team to discuss this, or maybe 1 or 2 board members, or your co-founders at the least, or some advisor, or your legal counsel. You're probably going to want to bring in some people that have, a senior leadership role or a senior advisory role in the company to share the bad news with them first and get some feedback from them, some perspective, some information, some data, some advice. So you collect a little bit of information, So first, you manage your own emotional household, then you collect some data and information from your advisors and people around you, and then you want to sleep on it. So I would suggest typically not to, when bad news breaks, you don't want to immediately turn around and break the bad news to the team. Because you don't have all the information, you don't have all the data, you probably are not emotionally in the right place to break the news. You're all excited, upset, fearful, stressed out. And if you communicate the bad news in that state of mind, it's going to translate and infuse everybody with that level of stress and confusion. You probably don't have any good idea of what possible solutions are, so people are going to be all stressed. You're going to stress out everybody. No work is going to get down, and everybody's going to get home probably really, really terrified. So instead of doing that, first you calm yourself down, you meditate on the problem, you research the problem, you try to understand a little bit better, you bring in advisors and senior leadership and you discuss it with them, you brainstorm with, you game plan with them a little bit on a high level to truly understand what to do, what the options are, what really is happening here. And then you decide when to communicate this with the team. I like to be as immediate as possible, but not too immediate when it comes to breaking bad news. So I'll give you an example. If I hear, if my attention is brought to the bad news on a Monday morning, I'm not gonna discuss that immediately on Monday, but I'm not gonna wait around for a week or two to discuss this. So I'm probably gonna want to take 2-3 days and break the bad news on the Wednesday. If it's later in the week, I wouldn't suggest, and one pro little tip for you is not to break bad news on a Friday, because there's just not enough, everybody's gonna know now the bad news, but they haven't had a chance to take any action to improve the situation. They get the bad news and now you've ruined their weekend, and they're just gonna dwell on that bad news the entire weekend and start the week with a really bad feeling and a bad emotional state of mind. I'd rather break bad news on a Monday or Tuesday than on a Friday. In general, probably 2-3 days after I've learned the bad news. The first day I meditate on it, the second day I talk to advisors and other people, collect data, and then the third day I just take another day to sleep over it, to sleep over everything that the advisors said, to everything that I thought, to everything the leadership team thought. And then usually by that time you have enough data, enough certainty, enough solutions, enough game planning done, and you're emotionally at a really good place where you can break the news without bullshit, being honest, truthful to the team, but still being at a really stable place, which is the next tip, right? When you break the news to the team, you want to lead with the main story. You want to start with the bad news, and you want to deliver that with no BS. Don't try to make it look better. Don't sell them the solution before you describe the problem. Just give it to people straight. If let's say the case that we just had, that your biggest customer just canceled, you have a team meeting, you have everybody come into the meeting, and then you start with the lead. You tell everybody, hey, I have bad news. The bad news is that our biggest customer just canceled. This means that our year is down by 30% in terms of our revenue projections. And this will have some really big consequences for us as a team, as a company. Full stop. Right? You told them that there's bad news. You told them what the fucking bad news are, and then you told them why they're bad, what the consequences are going to be, or that there are going to be consequences. So now everybody is shocked. Oh shit! But everybody knows what's going on. You're not talking for 50 minutes about life and this and that, and everybody's wondering, why the fuck are we in this meeting? And people can pick up on this. There's something bad going to come. What is the bad thing? What's the bad thing? What's the bad thing? They're not listening to you while they're occupied trying to figure out when are you going to tell them the truth. So just come out right straight away with the truth, with the news. Let it sink for a second. Let everybody go, oh shit, fuck, this, oh wow. Feel bad for a second or two. Count back 23, 22, 21. Okay, I recognize that this is a shock and this sucks. I hate it. This is a very bad thing for us to happen, right? Acknowledge it. Don't try to pretend that it's not bad news if it is bad news. Now, typically, you want to summarize to people kind of the little journey that you were on. You tell them, hey, I heard this on Monday. I spent all this time reaching out to the customer, researching what happened, trying to see if we can turn this around, if we can fix this. In my conversations with the customer, the leadership over there, I learned these 4 core things. Here are the 4 things that went wrong and why we lost this deal. And we as a company have to take responsibility for this. When you break bad news, the only person that's responsible, the only person that you can point any finger towards is yourself. If you're breaking the bad news, you're ultimately the person where the buck stops with you, and you're ultimately the person that assumes all responsibility because you are in a leadership position. You're not going to say, well, it was really Bob that fucked this deal up. I learned while talking to the customer. No, you put Bob in that position. You didn't help Bob do his job better. You ultimately, as a leader, you are responsible. So if you want to point any fingers, you say, I messed this up. I didn't do my job, and that's why we lost this customer, and here's how we're going to move forward. Or you don't point any fingers. You just assume responsibility as a team. You say, hey, we lost this customer, and we all had our fingers in this. Here's why we lost the customer. They were disappointed with X, Y, and Z, and here's how we need to learn from this and move on from this, and what the next steps are based on this news. So you don't point any finger to other people. You assume all responsibility yourself, and you assume responsibility as a team, and you make everybody realize that as a company, as a team, we'll have to fix this. And you tell people, here's kind of when I learned about this, here's the research I've done and the main lessons that I've learned. You boil it down. You need to make sure that you don't overwhelm people with information, right? Make sure that you summarize all your learnings, all your thoughts, all the discussions into a few bullet points. People are not going to be able to consume 3 days of research data. What your role is to be a filter and a curator of what information the team needs to know and what information is truly important here, the 80-20, and really will make a difference. You want to make sure to not overwhelm people with rambling on and on and on about things. So it's a good idea to really know your bullet points and to think through what are the key 3 reasons, not 30 reasons, right? If there's 30 reasons why the customer canceled, pick up the 3 most important ones. Pick up the 3 ones you can do something about, right? Make sure that you summarize things, you simplify things, and you present the team with information that they can A, digest, and B, information that's actionable so they can do something about it or they know what to do about it. So you present them with the data in a simplified, summarized fashion, and then you present the team with an ability, or you give the team the ability to air their frustration, to air their fears, to speak out. Before you offer solutions, you say, hey, here's what happened, here's all the data, a summary of what happened. I want to give everybody a quick moment to react emotionally. Just let's get it out of our systems. If somebody wants to scream and shout, do it now. If somebody wants to be like, pointing fingers and saying, you're all at fault of this and I hate you all, let's do it right now, but let's get it out of our system. How do you feel right now? Here's how I feel. I'm frustrated and disappointed in myself, and I'm really afraid about what the consequences are going to mean for this team, but I also believe in us and know we can do it. So I'm kind of in this mix of being pissed, being a little bit afraid, but even more importantly, the most dominant feeling I have right now is determination, right? That's where I'm at. Where are you guys at? And then stimulate and inspire people to speak up and ask questions if they have questions, because they will have questions about this, and answer their questions truthfully. Do a little Q&A session. And right after you've answered, you're gonna need to be a moderator. There's gonna be a good chances that the conversation is going to go out of control, and you need to rein it in at times and realize, what do we need to discuss now? What is a good question to answer later? Or if the question inspires a big debate and discussion that has no clarity and has a lot of disagreement within the team, you need to pin that discussion and say, hey, we need to talk about this. This is a very important point. We will schedule this for next week, but it's way beyond the scope of our 30-minute session where we need to talk about this one problem right now. So you need to be a good moderator and MC the conversation, the Q&A session. But you need to give people a chance to ask their question and to voice their grievances. Once they've done that, you present a few solutions and invite more solutions from the team. So my experience is that in moments of crisis, in moments of bad news, people are typically not great at instantly seeing the solutions that they should attack. And they're looking for you as a leader for that guidance, that clarity. They have this question in their mind, which is basically can boil down to, what do we do about this? What do we do now? What does this mean for us? And they're really looking at you for the answer to that question, right? That's why you're a leader. And it doesn't mean that you have to make the decision on that answer, but you have to give some guidance on it. So I typically would just offer the 2 or 3 solutions that are that you've boiled it down to. Hey, we've talked to our advisors, to legal advisors, to the board, to this person, that person. We've collected all the data. Based on all of this, it seems to me that there's three ways we can go. Number one, number two, number three. I have a preference myself, but I wanted to hear what you guys think and if somebody has a solution that we haven't considered before. 99% of the time, people will not have a solution on the spot, and there will be very grateful that you have a game plan and what to do next, something to hold on to, something to gain certainty around. So typically people, in my experience, will gravitate around the solution that you thought as well is probably the best one, right? There's a reason why you guys are a team. There's a reason why if you have good team alignment, if you have good team culture, it's going to be very rare that people want to do totally different things, because there's going to be one solution that seems more practical or more with higher chances for success than others. So people gravitate around that solution, and then you break down the solution in actionable steps. And again, not everything, not 455.7 steps, the bare bones, the big, okay, if we approach this problem and this bad news with solution number one, there's going to be 5 steps we have to take. We have to do A, B, C, D, and E to solve this problem. And this is the timeline which we have to do this. Here is, so you want to give some rough outline and then empower the team to come up with the details, but you also want to give some people real tasks to tackle today. You want to turn people around from like, this is the problem, give them some space to feel the issue, feel their fear, feel their emotional household. You want to give them a chance to air their questions and their uncertainties and their doubts. And then you want to rally the troops around a solution to this problem and a game plan, and then empower them to come up with the details of the game plan and execute on it, and tell them that you're trusting them, but also really encourage them to take action immediately. Not next week, not in 2 weeks, today, right now, right in this meeting. If people take action, they will feel better. It's impossible to be depressed while riding your bike. It's impossible for your team to be completely depressed and like fall into an emotional hole if they are taking action about the problem. They're going to instantly feel better. They're going to instantly start feeling more certain and thinking, you know what, we're going to figure this out. We're going to do this. You want to channel all that uncertainty, all that nervous energy into something productive. You want to take all that fear, all that nervousness, all that anxiety, and channel it into productivity and determination and clarity. And that's really the main point here. You want to end the meeting with a strong call to action, with a strong mandate of belief. You want to tell people that there's a reason why we are a team. There's a reason why we've gotten so far. There's a reason why in the past when we had bad news, we overcame those bad news. There's a reason why we're going to do this again. I don't know all the solutions to all our problems. I don't know how we're going to make it through this crisis perfectly. This is the solution that we think will work, but maybe we'll have to change our minds or change the game plan. But I do know that this is the team to make this happen. I believe in all of you. I believe in us. Let's make it happen. You have to reassure people and tap into that energy and into that certainty in everybody to make them think, you know what? She or he's right. Fuck yeah, we can do this. This is why we even exist, to tackle challenges, to overcome bad news. This is something that every team has to face, and this is going to be an opportunity for us to shine and become better and not to fail. And then you let the team, you have to check in regularly with the team, but this is how you break bad news in a nutshell. And there's a lot of things you have to do post the breaking of the bad news, right? That's the easy part, unfortunately. You have to do a lot more harder work after you've broken the bad news to make sure that you turn things around. But if you break bad news the wrong way, you're dead on arrival. You're probably never going to be able to fix the core issue, and they're going to fail because of that bad news, because you never approached it the right way. Take a moment to digest the bad news yourself. Research, get the data, get advice, get all the information, all the solutions together, summarize it, and then in a short succession, not weeks and weeks and months later, but within a day or two later, have a meeting, staff meeting, break the bad news from the get-go, trust your team, be authentic, be honest with them on what happened, assume all responsibility, offer them a chance to ask questions, to air their insecurities, their fears, to get it out of their system, and then offer a few solutions and invite their opinions and their feedback on those solutions. Rally the troops around one, get them to take action immediately and reassure their belief in themselves and your belief in them and your mandate that they can fix this problem, and then lead from the front. You can't just go back and hide in your office and let the team figure out the solution to the problem. You have to lead from the front. If there's a really painful bullet point on that action plan, you take that. Whatever it is, if it's like, yeah, we're gonna have to, first thing is we're gonna have to, whatever, I don't know, publicly be shamed and go out there and tell everybody that we're, write a press release and have a live Q&A session with our customers that we messed up. You have to be the person that does that Q&A session. You have to be the person that writes that message. You have to assume the most painful part, or you have to lead the troops from the front. You can't just tell them, here's the solution, now you go fight that really difficult battle. No, you as a leader need to fight from the front with the troops. And especially in the most painful parts, you have to, carry the weight with the team, become part of the team in the turnaround. That's going to be the most important thing. All right, this is all I got for you in terms of how to break bad news to your team in a productive way. If you have comments, feedback to share, experiences, stories, just leave it in the comments. Make sure to subscribe to blog.close.io. We publish once or twice a week highly tactical and strategic advice around startups and sales and success. And if you ever want to get in touch with me personally because you have really bad news to break with your team and you don't know who to talk about this with, shoot me an email at stelly@close.io. Always happy to help.